So glad to have you along. We are joined as always by Greg Engert, beer director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, a James Beard Award nominee. The group includes Where We Are, Church Key, Birch and Barley downstairs, of course Blue Jacket down by Nats Park, and GBD in DuPont Circle. Greg, it is always good to see you.
See you too.
What do we have on tap this week?
This week we have a delicious session IPA that just started coming to us in this area from Ballast Brewing Company out in San Diego, California.
Great brewery.
Even Keel, it's only 3.8%, 40 IBUs, which is not too bitter, especially for a low alcohol beer, but really pops in the nose with lots of hop aromatics.
We each drank 15 of them before we started. No.
So there's no denying the IPA care, yeah.
Beautiful. Very inviting nose.
So,
That's nice.
pretty tasty stuff, but only 3.8%. You're using at least 3 hops we know of that they tell you about. Spalt hops, which are classic German noble varietal, which is cool because you think of using those hops more for like pilsners and such, but you want the bitterness to be a little bit clean and refreshing here. Cluster hops, which are one of the kind of original American hops that really got out there with a little bit more bold flavor, kind of gives you a lemony, leafy note. And then a tandem hops, which don't get the credit they deserve. They're a great Pacific Northwest American hop that are almost like right between Cascade and Amarillo. They're floral and kind of orangey, grapefruity on the palate. You see them in quite a few beers, so that's what's giving you that kind of big tropical fruit in the nose.
What is the critical thing they're doing differently to reduce the alcohol volume but still keep the taste somewhat similar?
So, the critical thing is that you're starting with a lower original gravity, so you're starting with less sugar to begin with, and then you're fermenting it down to a smaller final gravity. So basically you're making a smaller beer. This ends up at 3.8%, but of course is not bone dry. They don't ferment out all the sugar, so it's still got some residual kind of grainy quality there. That's the big deal. So you could do it. So you could make this exact same recipe with a higher original gravity and finish it off at 7% alcohol, add more hops, and it'd be an IPA, right? So they've kind of trimmed down the body. They've got less fermentation going on. It only hits 3.8, which is very, very low for session IPAs. Most people who are traditionalists love it. They think that session IPA should at least be 4.5 or even better, 4% and under. Some session IPAs are closer to 5%. So that's really cool. And the other big thing, though, is that they're moving a lot of the hop character to the end, right? So the bitterness here is kind of bright and refreshing rather than drivingly intense. And I think that's why you get some of that cereal grain quality, because they're making sure not to make it too bitter, or else that would overwhelm the malt character of the beer. Meanwhile, they're dumping a ton of hops in at the end. They're dumping it like late boil, whirlpool, hopbacks, and dry hopping. Dry hoppings after it's done fermenting, so you can keep that intense aroma without intensifying the bitterness on the palate. So I think that's the big distinction.
Versatility is the word that comes to mind here. What would you pair this with?
So I recently, we talked about British beer a couple weeks ago, but I love British bitter, and to me, British bitter is these are almost like American versions of like British bitter. Low alcohol, good malt characters we discussed, bitter without being bitter, and of course the American version gives it all that huge intensity of hop in the nose. So I like to think about the beers that the food that I like to eat with British bitters, and fish and chips comes to mind like immediately.
With the vinegar.
With the vinegar, yeah, it'd be awesome with that. And then just any bar food you can think of, like crisp, refreshing. Bitterness can make spicy things, and bitterness and alcohol can make spicy things overly spiced, too hot on the palate. So if you're eating hot wings and you love your IPAs, let's do a session IPA, less bitter, less alcohol, with that heat intensity. But I mean, this can clean up a plate of nachos. It can cut down the saltiness of bacon on a bacon cheeseburger or something like that. Yeah, bacon cheddar burger.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, or even just like, now every place in the world has a kind of artisanal grilled cheese that's just big and rich and stinky sometimes. I think this would be awesome with that.
All right, Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, please always do drink responsibly, and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.